thank you everyone who has come to join us this evening to our event honoring our 40 under 40 real estate and construction rising stars. My name is Rebecca Lewis. I will be the MC and moderator for this evening. I'd like to start out by thanking our excellent sponsors who made tonight's event possible. New York Electrical Contractors Association, the New York Building Contract, Mad Equities, Madadnock, apologies, Construction, and Sidley Austin LLP. Thank you to all of those sponsors. We wouldn't be putting on this event without you. Um, we are only have about an hour tonight. It's a little bit shorter than if we were in person, unfortunately. We're all looking forward to getting back to our in-person event soon so that there's a little bit of hobnobbing and meets and greets and, have an opportunity for everyone to really meet each other. But we're going to try to make the best of what we can with these continued remote and virtual events. And I'm hoping that we'll have a really good discussion this evening to honor all of our 40 under 40 honorees today. Um, so with that, I'd like to get started and move into our main event for the evening, a panel discussion with some of the top leaders in the industry of real estate and construction. They're here to share their insight and to offer their advice to our rising stars and other rising stars who are tuning in this evening, for as they move forward in their careers in the industry. This evening, our panel consists of Jay Badame, President of Construction Management at AECOM, Michael Elmendorf, President and CEO of the Associated General Contractors of New York State, um, Omar Toro-Vaca, Senior Vice President of Real Estate at Kasirer, and Charlie Avolio, President and General Manager of New York at Suffolk Construction. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Hopefully, we only have a short amount of time, but I know that we'll have a great discussion. So,
Thank you.
To start out, I'd like to just throw out a question for all of you. I'd like to start by asking each of you, um, you know, who some of the mentors for you were as you were rising up. It's been long careers for all of you, and I'm sure that none of you would say that you got here on your own, and I'm sure that none of our honorees tonight would say that they are getting to where they are on their own either. So, who are some of the mentors that you had as you were coming up in the industry?
You want to call us out, Rebecca, by name so we don't step on each other?
Sure. Jay, you go first because you spoke
Sure.
up, so you get the honor.
Sure. Well, thank you. So I started with Tishman in 1985. My mentors were certainly John Tishman, then Dan Tishman, and certainly Mike Manella, who was a senior exec in the company. So those were the folks that mentored me while we were in the private enterprise. I'm kind of jealous of Charlie now because he's not with a publicly traded company anymore. But in this world of Sarbanes-Oxley and double-digit growth, I'm in a different place than I was when I started with Tishman. So you could certainly pick on one hand the people who have helped to guide you, and we call them their mentors, but they're also your godfathers. It's very important in the industry to have somebody that's going to bring you under their wing to help you rise up through the ranks. And they helped me get up from a project engineer on the South Street Seaport to the president of the company. So those are my three go-to folks.
Charlie, you next.
Sure. Well, Rebecca, thanks for including me in the panel. I really appreciated it. And, I would say that I started in 1986 and I was a turner. And I always seemed to want to gravitate to the folks that I thought I respected as builders. So the mentors, and I have someone in mind, is one is the project executive that I worked for on my fourth project, and that was Sal Escala. Sal is retired. I think he had a 45-year career. But it was always that personal connection of listening to the stories and being able to hear the conversations of the issues going on, well above my head when I started as a field engineer or a project manager. But Sal was one of those people that throughout my career in any position that I had, I can always bounce off questions dumb questions or, things that I should have known, but I didn't know how to react to. So it was always around someone that I thought I could learn from.
Omar, you next.
I think for me, it was always the professors who had one foot in academia and one foot in practice. And originally I trained as an architect, and eventually I studied urban policy and public administration. And as an architect, it was all the professors who worked in different kinds of firms, right? Whether they were large or small. There was something always really interesting and intriguing about how they had this double life between their career and then what they taught in the classroom, and the sort of overlap between those made those folks the most interesting from a career perspective, but also I guess the professors that appealed most to me, because I really appreciated learning from the nuts and bolts. And then later in politics, learning urban policy, it was also the professors who moonlighted, who had amazing careers running campaigns, but also took the time to go back to the academy and teach, a course on how to build a political campaign, and how that might inform the way in which politicians move projects forward or win a policy piece.
And Mike, you last. Who were some of your mentors when you were coming up in the industry?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, and thanks for including me. It's good to be here with Jay and Charlie and Omar. So my path was maybe a little different than theirs, because I'm in the construction industry, but we're the association, right? So I came from a different background. I came from government and the general business community. And I started very early. When I was in college, I started working for Governor George Pataki. Had plans to go to law school. If you credit George Pataki with nothing else, he saved the world from one more lawyer, because 3 terms later, I walked out with him on the last day and never got around to going to law school. I was 21 years old when I started working for him. And when he left at the end of his 3rd term, I had spent a full 1/3 of my life there, doing things, working on things, working with people, going places, and being part of major issues from the post 9/11 response, the immediate response that day, and lots of other smaller things in between. So certainly he's a mentor to me, and a friend to this day. I mean, the confidence that he put in me at an early age to do the things that I was able to do, and ultimately be a member of his senior staff, put me on the path that ended up with me being here at AGC. I've been here now for 10 years, which is hard to believe. The time has flown. Prior to that, after the governor left office, I ran the NFIB in New York for 5 years and change, which is the largest broad-based business organization in New York, with about 10,000 members. Basically doing anything you can think of, not any company that was not publicly traded. So worked with a lot of amazing folks along the way that certainly have helped, shape me into the person that I am, and the ability to lead the organization and the industry as I do with my team. But if I've got to name one, certainly the governor was a great mentor and a great friend, and I'm still grateful for the opportunity he gave me.
So we've actually got our first question in the Q&A already, and it's a topic that we were planning to cover anyway, but since it's being asked, might as well jump right into it. Looking at the industry, construction, real estate, it's been a turbulent year for everyone, but it's been especially turbulent for anything that involves kind of anything that's hands-on, things that are harder to do remote, things that really involve being there. How has the industry changed over the past year, and what kind of future changes do you expect to see after COVID? Once things really have kind of returned to normal, we'll say, some degree of normalcy. What kind of changes do you expect to remain once this crisis is really kind of as over with as I suppose it could ever be? And I guess we'll go backwards. We'll go backwards this time. Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly this has been a challenging year for everybody, no matter who you are or what you do. The things that we normally do, we haven't been doing, or we've been doing them differently. And to some degree, I think some of that will continue going forward, even as we're hopefully now coming out of this. As an industry, though, I think the construction industry probably was a lot more fortunate than many others, because we were we were essential. And I say we were essential because we are essential, right? I mean, I think we always felt that way about ourselves, but we kept working to a very significant degree across New York. I know things were a little different in the city because it's a tougher environment down there, but for the most part, construction kept working, and it was really an important thing. We kept paychecks going, we kept commerce moving, we kept supply chains open. So that was a good thing. Looking forward, I think a lot of the questions are how is the demand for construction going to change? The way we live, the way we do business, the way we travel is, I think, going to be permanently altered by this, not only because of public health concerns, but look at what we're doing right now, right? A lot of people have realized you can do what you do somewhere other than where you were doing it before COVID. And so how is that going to either delete demand for certain types of construction and certain types of real estate, or add it elsewhere? And I don't know if anybody really knows the answer to that yet, but I think certainly the smart contractors, the smart sectors are the ones who are thinking about that and are going to be trying to position themselves to capitalize on it, because things are going to be different going forward, no doubt.
I guess just from that perspective, I mean, there's certainly been a lot of talk about people not returning to the office, and how that's going to change the real estate landscape. I guess what's that mean? I guess for construction, are we expecting less building in the future, as more people realize that they can just do what they can do from home? More people potentially moving away, making their COVID quarantine homes permanent. And what does this mean? Is there an expectation that I guess construction will decrease in the city, or will it still increase? It's still New York City, it's still New York State. Throw that out, I guess, before we kind of start moving around more, to anyone who wants to answer.
I'm happy picking up there. I mean, I think what might happen is that you'll just see an acceleration of construction. There's a lot of federal money coming to the state. There's a huge interest in infrastructure and advancing projects that have been, on the books for a while, and have a lot of due diligence underway that could be, quote unquote, shovel ready. And at the same time, there's still a housing crisis. Even though a lot of people have left, we still have a lot of housing to build. And a lot of the efforts in zoning and public approvals that have been the subject of so many contentious battles with the community lately are going to be resolved one way or another. And I think there is a lot of interest in seeing that those battles become compromises, right? Compromises between communities, between the business sector, between government, that lead to jobs, that lead to growth, that lead to investment. And more importantly, what you're going to see is certain trends that were already making New York a better city accelerate. So, our interest in public space, our interest in public transit, and rebuilding our transit network is only heightened after the pandemic. And I think that will all lead to an increase in construction activity and construction jobs, and hopefully, new processes of engaging and doing that with people in communities where these projects are intended to, have an impact.
And certainly, infrastructure bills for construction is always the first thing off the lips of politicians when talking about how to build back better. And the next big spending bill out of Washington is everyone's looking for the infrastructure bill. So it's still big things on the way. One would hope. Jay, Charlie, if you want to weigh in on how the industry has changed over the past year, and what kind of changes you can expect once things are really kind of back to normal-ish.
Sure, Rebecca. I'm going to look at it maybe from a different lens. I am really proud of how the construction and real estate industry worked a year ago with the governor's office, and not just New York, but all of the states, I think, that all of us have worked in around the country. We were all fortunate to be in the conversation of how should the environment at the job site change to ensure that the essential work can move forward. And there was really a sense in my mind of real cooperation, of real collaboration. There's a sense of caring on the projects, that I have not seen in the industry in a long time. Labor and management and government and real estate developers all came together to really do what was best for the health and safety of the workforce and all of our employees across the industry. I think that we've had to quickly learn new technologies and how to communicate, and this platform is one of them. And I think on a going forward basis, I agree with Omar. I'm very bullish on New York. I think we've all been through downturns that have affected us, and those downturns have been caused by many different things. I think our rebound is going to be much quicker than it has been in other events that have occurred in New York in the past. And I agree. I think the infrastructure, wherever you sit on which side of the aisle, a broader definition of infrastructure that includes affordable housing, that includes broadband access to communities, things like that is only going to help our industry for construction jobs as well as open up developments. But I do think that our industry is a hands-on collaborative industry. So we could only go so far with superintendents and safety personnel at the job site and everyone else remote, architects remote. You still need to walk and feel and touch the product. So I'm looking forward to us, getting back on the rebound pretty quickly.
So I see the work from home really as temporary. I don't see it being long-term. I know people would love to stay at home, but you see the major corporations in New York telling everyone they got to get back to work 100%, whether it's July 1st or September 1st. New York, the condo market is flat, but it is flat, but it's also very high in Austin and Nashville. So there's places in the country that are profiting by the folks that are leaving New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and California. But those are the states who are going to probably profit more from the infrastructure bills, right? So I think it is going to be a balance. I do see a shot in the arm for certainly the majority of the blue states that are going to go for the next 5 or 6 years. That'll be airports, that'll be Port Authority, that'll be Gateway, that'll be bus terminal. So there'll be a lot of public work that obviously everybody on the call will profit from. Even though some of the high-end condos we won't see in New York for 5 or 10 years. You can't finance a hotel in New York, so I don't see any of those happening in the next few years. So, as Charlie said, we are a resilient group of people. And, if this area is not busy, we'll just, we all have different talent sets. And at the end of the day, we're just builders, right? So I am bullish on the next 5 to 10 years. I certainly think there'll be something of an infrastructure bill, whatever it entails. We'll all get a piece of that pie.
I guess looking at what's happened in the past year, I guess, has anything structurally kind of changed in the industry, in the way business is done and how projects are approached, that you think will carry on into the future? There's so many discussions about, how the evolution, how we've adapted to pandemic, and how many of those things will continue on into, the post-pandemic era. Just for example, no more snow days to I'm sure many children's chagrin, because we realize that there is a degree of remote learning that is possible. From a voting standpoint, expanding absentee voting in New York is another thing, that is potentially going to come out of that, was a necessity during the pandemic that may become a permanent part of civic life in New York. Are there any such changes that have happened in real estate and in construction that you think will carry on, innovations or, adaptations that started out as a necessity that you think will continue on as something that will ultimately improve the industry? I don't know if anyone has an answer, so I'll just throw that out. And, if anyone has any thoughts, let you jump in.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Like, just two things that come to mind. I think there'll be an evolution of mechanical systems in buildings, a push towards healthier buildings overall. There could be simple design changes in how we filtrate the air. It could be how many air changes you put into a building. So that came to mind. I think the second thing on technology is platforms like open space, where our superintendents can walk the job with a live camera that downloads to the model, and the design professionals can do some level of inspection without coming to the job site. That's something that the industry learned, and maybe that's something that sticks as a best practice going forward.
I think for me and my colleagues, and I certainly want to recognize, Varun Sanyal, who is the vice president at Kasirer, leading so many of the real estate projects we work on, who's being honored tonight. Some of the innovation that we have experienced and that he's been leading public engagement on has to do with the idea that, the dialogue didn't stop, right? The dialogue with communities had to continue in order for so many of these entitlement projects to move forward. And even though there have been challenges in the courts, in particular around like the Gowanus rezoning and others, there's been some innovation in trying to figure out how to bring people together so that they can review projects, voice their opinion, influence the outcome of projects, and continue to be participants in what has to be a robust public review process. As there is so much development happening, people really want to say in it, and they want to make their neighborhoods better. They have an opinion about how that can happen. And the one aspect of doing that on Zoom that I think isn't going to last forever is the idea that that's the only way to do it, right? It was the only way we did engagement because we were quarantining, but as we move forward, it'll be in person, it'll be on Zoom, it'll be with a website. And so there's a multiplicity of platforms and formats that I think people are going to have to embrace in order to get information out to people in the community.
Any other thoughts, or should we move on? I suppose to another question.
It's fine.
Mike or Jay?
No, fire away.
I guess something that I'd like to ask each of you about as well. Covering New York City, there's often a lot of pushback to new development. There's a lot of NIMBYs. There's a lot of people who don't like to see changes to their neighborhoods. And I'm wondering if, how you think that, the changes of the pandemic can provide new opportunities to, I guess, get more community engagement and community support for some of these major projects that will likely be, things that will help New York come back through the creation of jobs, through the creation of housing, through just things that will attract people back to New York. Do you see an opportunity here, to, I suppose, kind of change some minds for people who have traditionally perhaps been hesitant to accept big new kind of real estate and construction projects in the city?
So we
or
finished
New York in
Sure.
general.
I mean, we just finished One Vanderbilt, which was a major commercial office building by Grand Central. And the developer there, SL Green and Hines, had to contribute $200 million to subway improvements at Grand Central. The problem is nobody's in Grand Central now, but that's another issue to deal with. But that was basically allowing a major development project to go forward, which is 75% leased. So there you have a developer who's very bullish in New York because their only assets are in New York. They can't go. SL Green has almost 30 million square feet of class A, B, C office space in New York. They can't go to other cities. They're here. So they have to make sure that New York is very vibrant. And obviously, there's a lot that has to do before New York City gets back to normal, but they're certainly banking on it. But the fact that they invested in a new entrance to Grand Central, $200 million, that's how you get things done, right? It's always about what can be done for the community to allow the developers to go forward with their buildings.
Any other thoughts on that possibility? It's something that I think about often because that's almost it's almost always the first thing that I see is community pushback to
Yep.
major new developments, and just wanted to get and any other thoughts about if there's an opportunity here to maybe change some minds and get get more community support that might not have been there before. If not, okay. That's it's a tip. It's I think it's a little tricky. I understand. Thinking about how to win over people who maybe don't like you.
Well, it's not that people don't like other people. It's that people, are primarily interested in their own well-being. And even when, you ask people to think about the greater good, the growth of the city, the growth of the economy, stability in jobs, building new hospitals in communities, they will first think about how it affects them, how it affects their block, their neighborhood, and their friends and family before they will think about the greater good. And so, it's a challenge for sure to deal with opposition that's entrenched, and that happens across all kinds of communities in New York. But I think that it's time uh, that the dialogue that has been brewing over the past year, as so many events in New York have percolated despite the pandemic and despite everyone being at home, to really have the conversation about where development is happening, how it can be more equitable, and how the federal money that's coming in can be put to use in communities where there is the most need, where there are people who are hugely underserved by healthcare. And that ultimately is the definition of growth, right? Opening new markets and addressing markets that are underserved. And that could alone, prioritizing that alone could generate growth and could continuity in this pattern we've been seeing.
you know, uh, I like to shift gears a little. Excuse me. I like to shift gears a little bit. You know, to talk about, each of your own growth in the industry. Obviously, you're all leaders of your industry right now, but no one starts out that way. I want to, and you all have very different roles in the construction and real estate industry as well. Just kind of a testament to just how diverse this industry is, how many jobs are available, how many different positions need to be filled, and how many the variety of people and thoughts that need to go into the industry. So I want to ask, where were you in your careers? What were you doing when you were around the age of our honorees this evening, when you were yourselves just rising stars? And how did you really wind up to the position that you're in today? And Mike, I'll throw it to you. I feel like we haven't heard from you in a little while.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I remember when I used to be on these 40 under 40 lists, and now I'm hoping there's going to be a 50 under 50. I don't have much time. I don't have much time left. I'm nearing that too, but at least there's 10 more chances to make the cut. So, I'm 47 now, so I was 37 or so when I started at AGC. And as I said, I sort of fit in a different space here because I'm not necessarily where I am because I was an expert on construction. I dealt with it certainly on the government side. I dealt with it when I was at NFIB, but I think that the board selected me because I had sort of just a combination of experiences that I think they thought prepared me to be able to lead this organization. And I think we've had a lot of success in that regard. We're growing. The last year was certainly a challenge for everybody, but it was a very good year for AGC New York State. We grew. We added a lot of contractor members, I think, because they saw the value of what we did when everybody was in COVID crisis mode and trying to figure out what's next, what are the rules, what can we do, what can we not do. We opened up our resources to everybody, not just our members. We opened it up to the whole industry because it just seemed like the right thing to do as a service. And a lot of those folks have joined because they saw the value. Our ability and my leading our team to respond to that was shaped by the things I did before, the things I was doing 10 years ago and beyond that. Like I mentioned, when I was in the governor's office, we had no shortage of emergencies, right? For some people, a crisis like this was a new thing. We had more than our fair share of crises, during that 12 years that we were there. And so I think it helped prepare me for that. It's been a great 10 years. It's great to see these honorees, and to think about, sort of the miles that I've been through since I was in their place. But it's great to see the future of the industry here. Certainly our honoree, Sarah Hill, who is an extraordinarily talented young woman and engineer who's vice president of transportation for us, but the whole group, it brings back fond memories of where I was 10 years ago. And it makes me feel really optimistic about the future, to the point that Jay and Charlie and Omar have made. I think the industry is gearing up for a very busy time. And you look at the folks that are being honored here today, I think we've got the talent to deliver on that potential.
Charlie, how about you? Where were you when you were, in your 20s or 30s, yourself a rising star? How do you get to where you are? And as well, any advice that you would give for our honorees?
Absolutely. I don't think I was ever considered a rising star, and I might be, as Mike said, I could be in the 60 under 60 group, right? But I do want to send a shout out to Jay Kwan, our senior project manager from Suffolk, who I think in some ways is a mentor to me, because he's building the hardest project we have in our portfolio, for all reasons outside of his control, down at Gantry Point in Long Island City. So congratulations, Jay. But I was really fortunate when I started. A lot of projects were ending, and the company was going into starting up new jobs. And I started out in the field, an entry-level position, into an assistant superintendent, into a superintendent. And I was moved around a lot. I was on jobs for a couple of months, 6 months, maybe a year. And I was on a lot of projects in the first 5 years, but I saw a lot of different things. Got the opportunity to go into the pre-con department and purchasing for a number of years. So I got a little bit of business background. And I would say in my 30s to 40s, I was transitioning from pre-con to project executive to a vice president of operations. And, I realize no one gets a lot of new opportunity every year or two. Honestly, they come in longer segments, and you have to be mindful of the opportunity. And it could be within your firm, and maybe it's something outside your firm, I dare to say. But when those opportunities present themselves, you have to think about them really hard. But as you're growing a career, be engaged, be thoughtful, always want to continue learning, because there's always something different out there. Be humble, and be likable, take advice, but always do your best and look for those opportunities to push and challenge yourself. If you're challenging yourself, you're going to get recognized for that effort, and kind of move yourself through your career.
Jay, you're already unmuted. What about yourself?
So, everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, and, myself included. I graduated from Penn State in 1978 with a degree in structural engineering. At Tishman, I started in 1985 on the South Street Seaport. You're getting old when the building you built has been demolished and rebuilt, as the Seaport Pier 17 was. But my defining moment, I tell my folks, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Never call me too often, but don't call me too late. And a rising tide lifts all boats. But there was a defining moment in my career when I went after a project. Actually, Charlie won it. It was the Performing Arts Center in Newark, and Turner won the project. But I was the lead project manager, and I was supposed to get a package on a Friday delivered to my home of the proposal, the talking points. I was just a young project manager at the time, and the package didn't come. So all weekend, Jay was there writing a speech. And so I memorized a 10-minute speech over the weekend, and I got to deliver it in practice in front of John Tishman on a Monday morning. So that was my defining moment, where John Tishman said, "You had nothing. You came in and delivered a flawless presentation. So you're now going to be the new leader of the company." So everybody on the call, And certainly Ali Shadri, I want to shout out to him at AECOM for being one of the honorees here. So everybody's going to have a chance to make the same impression to their leader as I did with John Tishman at that one defining moment. And you'll know it, and your superior will know it, and you'll be recognized, certainly as I have been recognized by my company to be the president.
And Omar, what about you? Tell us a little bit about where you were when you were kind of starting out, when you were yourself a rising star, whether or not I guess you would consider yourself a rising star, and the kind of advice that you would give to our honorees now moving forward into what sounds like everyone agrees will be a very exciting time for the industry.
Yeah. I think I would just consider myself an impatient person more than anything. And I think that often led my decisions around, career choices and how quickly to move from one path to another. And it was, an impatience to want to learn more and more. And so, in your 20s, I think your job is to show up on time and learn. And if you get those two things right, people start offering you opportunities, right? You're reliable, you're dependable, and you're curious, and so people understand that you're engaged. And as you move into your 30s, I think you start to get to make decisions because people trust you. People in decision-making positions trust you and trust your opinion and your judgment. And so you get to start picking the projects you want to work on and turning down the ones that aren't really a good fit for you. And that leads to more growth and more responsibility, more interactions with clients, and of course, recognition. So I think, at every point along the way, I always ask myself, well, what do I want to get out of this new experience, other than learning something new? And, it always came down to, making sure I was contributing something to the community I was a part of. And in some instances, that was an international community because I spent many years traveling on a plane, literally, nonstop, going to different countries, working on international projects. And in some cases, that was, a long slog of public approvals in one community for 2 years in a row. And as long as I felt like at the end of the process, I was helping move something forward that would mean something to that community and to the neighbors of the project, I was very much satisfied and ready to move to the next thing.
There is, I think we've gotten 2 questions now about the future of the industry, and I'd like to throw it out to each of you as well. There are questions about how, moving forward to better diversify the talent in the industry, of the people who get involved in the industry. So, more women, more people of color, to get that diversity of thought and opinions to match the diversity of, you know, jobs and positions that are available. What is being done and what are you doing, if anything, to try to attract a more diverse group of people to join the industry so that, there are new ideas, new opinions as it grows, and, it doesn't stagnate, and that it's not just, an industry of, you know, I know this is a panel of white men, but it's not just an industry of white men.
So I can start off with that. Certainly, as a publicly traded company, ED&I and ESG are the buzzwords that we all have to live by. They're the tenets of the new world order. However, if you look at diversity, we have never been short in the trade, certainly in the union trades, of minorities, women, African American, Hispanic. So we're doing a major project at 270 Park Avenue in New York City, and we're partnering with new non-traditional employment for women and the helmets to hard hats. So we have a program with those organizations and our client, JP Morgan Chase, to assure that there are more minorities coming through the workforce to work on those projects. And also at the airports, Port Authority always has requirements for EEO and also for M&WBE participations. And in those large projects, you're really going to hire the talent from the local area codes, the local zip codes. And so that's how you can take care of a community, is have the people within the community working on the construction projects. Of course, we're only there for a short time, whether we're on a job from 12 to 24 to 36 or 48 months. So those are pretty good incomes that can be afforded to the local community on these large construction projects.
Charlie, Mike, Omar, is there anything that you'd like to see happen, or that you're engaged in to try to diversify your industry? I think that our list is fairly diverse. I think it shows that there is beginning change, but there's obviously always more room for growth to bring in more people. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important topic, and I'm happy to see the diversity in the honorees, and the future of our industry being more diverse, not just people of color and women, right? Both. And I think there's a couple of things that we can do as an industry. That you need to be deliberate in action. It's not going to just come over time. And I think it starts in education, supporting STEM education, let's say, through organizations like the Salvadori Center or ACE Mentor, where you get the interest of kids when they're younger in our communities to want to be in our industry, and not just say, let me just go into the trades, because there is a good amount of, as Jay was just saying, tremendous diversity in the trades. Well, how come not in engineering, architecture, business, the other, multitude of jobs that we provide? And I think you need to change recruiting habits, and think about different schools in the fall when you go out to visit colleges and universities. Go to places that you haven't been, places off the beaten path, that you can really think about, bringing people in that are different than the four of us, and how we look, maybe how we think. And that takes a risk to go out and say, let me bring in folks that might think a little bit different than us. But I think in the market and where we need to go with the industry, those are the types of things we need to do.
I think on the recruitment front, it's something that we pride ourselves in doing super well is a serious internship program, one that exposes people to real work that's challenging and rewarding and interesting, and making sure that we seek out candidates who are qualified, are curious, and are diverse is something we pride ourselves in. But also making sure to connect them to people in the industry who aren't all the same either, right? So bringing women in to speak, doing a brown bag lunch, obviously all that's become much harder while people work remotely. But we have doubled down and decided that this year we're doubling our internship program, in particular because we don't have an office constraint, and we can actually use the help. We're very busy, and we're organized enough now on Zoom, and somehow more efficient, perhaps in some instances than in person, that we can delegate and incorporate the work of all those interns. And I would encourage every company out there in the construction and real estate industry to really double down on internships and summer jobs, not just for college kids, but also for high school kids.
Yeah, and I just to add a final point on that, this is an industry with enormous opportunity. I mean, pre-COVID, across New York and really across the country, had workforce shortages in construction. There were not enough people to do the work, and these are great, really interesting careers. And so we've worked with groups like the Minority Women Contractors and Developers Association and others to try to figure out, how do you connect folks that are looking for opportunities, particularly in communities that either are underserved or maybe historically didn't think that the construction industry was for them, or that they would fit in the construction industry, and really sort of change that paradigm. And it's hard work, right? I mean, a lot of the focus has been on the public work side, and it's kind of bled into some of the private work on contracting or subcontracting goals. But often those goals are difficult to meet because you don't have the capacity. Having goals like that doesn't will into existence new businesses that are owned by diverse people. What does it is changing the makeup of the industry. And that really starts with the workforce, right? Because where do contractors come from? They come from the industry. People don't just decide that they're going to open up a construction company because they think that there's an opportunity because of something the government is doing. They need to know how to do the work. And if you make the industry more diverse, ultimately the ownership of the industry is going to be more diverse. And that's a good thing for everybody. It's good for those individuals. It's good for those communities that are going to be connected to careers and lucrative and interesting careers at that. But it's just good for business. And it's harder than setting a goal and yelling at contractors to meet it. But that's really where the work needs to be. Because it will produce change in the industry that on a generational basis will make the industry look different, look more like our state and our society. And the opportunities are there. I mean, I think we still need to see how economically and workforce wise things are going to shake out as we come out of COVID. But if folks want a career, if they want to get to work in this industry, we're going to need them, especially in the context of what we've been talking about, all the funding, all the infrastructure bill, all the opportunities that we think will emerge. So we're fully committed to a more diverse industry. We've been working on it for quite some time. And it's just the right thing to do on many levels.
And it sounds like there's some initiatives going on. There's a lot of commitment, and you were all a great panel. I'm so glad you were able to join today. But I'm sure that we look forward to the day when perhaps some of our honorees are able to join in panels like this that truly reflect the diversity of our city and our state. As they go into senior positions like yourselves. And I'm sure that's a day that all of us are looking forward to. And unfortunately, we are out of time now. I think that was a good note to end on for this panel discussion. I want to thank each of you for joining us. All four of you. I think this was a good discussion. I hope that our honorees and our attendees agreed as well. Thank you again for joining. And it's time to move on to our next and final section of tonight's event. Again, it's unfortunately very short. We all look forward to getting back to in person. But it's the time of the evening for us to acknowledge all 40 of our honorees, all 40 of our rising stars in the real estate and construction industry. There will be a PowerPoint that comes up on the screen with everyone's name. Please feel free to shout out any congratulations or any names in the chat. We encourage that. And before we get started, I want to apologize in advance to any names to any person whose name I mispronounce. It is unintentional. Please feel free to reach out to me if there is a mispronunciation. I can't correct it in real time, unfortunately, but I would like to get any corrections for moving forward so that I don't make the mistake again. So the link will be to our list is in the chat if you'd like to go in there as well and read some of their bios. And without further ado, we will we'll start with the honoring of our 40 rising stars today. First up, we have, excuse me. Oop, I don't have my screen at full. I apologize. Trevor Adler, partner at Strook. John Atwell, assistant superintendent at Skanska USA Civil Northeast. Polina Bakhtiarov, vice president at Omni New York. Alana Budo, vice president at Barbara Wagner Communications. Michael Boso, attorney at Calleran, O'Hara and Mills. Alexandra Budd, vice president of leasing at RXR Realty. Matthew Berger, project executive at Consili Construction Company. Lauren Caladrialo, a licensed real estate salesperson at JRT Realty Group. Ali Chowdhury, Senior Vice President and Chief of Development and Government Relations at AECOM. Minali Deku, Director of Capital Project Management at the Office of the New York City Deputy Mayor for Operations. Daniel Eggers of Counsel at Greenberg Traurig. Crystal Fisher, co-founder of Ease Hospitality, Fisher Brothers. Wendy Gallegos, Community Development Manager at Mad Equities. Robert Gibbon, Special Counselor to the Executive Director at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Shira Gidding, Principal at True Development. Brittany Henry, Vice President of Operations at Urban Strategies of New York, Inc. Sarah Hill, Vice President of Transportation Services at the Associated General Contractors of New York State. Eric Hirani, President of Infinite Consulting Corp. Jay Kwan, Senior Project Manager at Suffolk Construction Company. Alex Leopold, Managing Director at Newmark. Eric Liang, Vice President at Columbia Property Trust. Michael Long, Project Manager at McKissick & McKissick. Ryan Monell, Director of City Legislative Affairs at the Real Estate Board of New York. Ray Moya, Chief Operating Officer at Beam Living. Amelia Nicholas, Development Manager at Midtown Equities. Ayana Oliver Taylor, Senior Director at L&M Development Partners. Michael Papagiannikis, Chief of Staff, New York Building Congress. Peter Racino, Director of Operations and Assistant Executive Secretary for the New York Electrical Contractors Association. John Rooney, Economic Inclusion Director at New York City Business Unit of Gilbane Building Company. Daphne Rose Sanchez, Executive Director of Kinetic Communities Consulting. Varun Sayal, Vice President of Real Estate at Kasirer. John Silviano, Principal at Barone Management. Christopher Strebel, Senior Project Manager at LaChase Construction Services. Samantha Sweeney Anaruma, Communications Director at Subcontractors Trade Association. Jason Tavares, Project Manager at Turner Construction Company. Natisha Thomas, Residential Operations Manager at Rudin Management Company. Nikki I'm so sorry. Nikki Sitsmanikis, partner at Goldstein Hall. Jennifer Rohrheit, associate at Sidley Austin. Aaron Weaver, real estate associate, Columbia University. And Alyssa Zahler, director of commercial leasing, Two Trees Management. Congratulations again to all of our honorees this evening. And I also once again apologize to anyone whose name I mispronounced. Please feel free to reach out to me if you feel so obliged, so that I don't make any such mistakes again. With that, that does wrap up our event for this evening. Before we close out, I just want to thank once again everyone for joining us, our panelists for a great discussion. And to also once again thank our sponsors, New York Electrical Contractors Association, New York Building Congress, Mad Equities, Manandadnock Construction, and Sidley Austin LLP. And for anyone who is interested, we do have some upcoming events that should be very interesting as well. Please join us for the next installment of our AARP sponsored series, State Legislative Forum focused on the Bronx, which is Friday, May 21st at 10 a.m. And our next AARP sponsored series in the Legislative Forum series that's focused on Long Island, which is Thursday, May 27th, also at 10 a.m., as well as our upcoming celebration of our Queen's Power 100 list, which will be Wednesday, June 2nd at 5 p.m. Registration for all of those events are free, and the link to sign up is in the chat. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Congratulations again as well to all of our honorees. I hope that this was a good discussion. I hope to see you at future events as well, and hopefully we'll be back in person soon. Hope you all have a very good evening.